When you first look at the Kia EV6, you see a premium electric crossover that looks sharp, modern, and packed with tech. But the real question is one that matters for every EV buyer. Can it live up to its promise of long-distance usability? And specifically, can it manage something close to 500 kilometers, or approximately 310 miles, on a single charge under real-world conditions? Kia claims its recent facelifted EV6, now with an 84 kilowatt-hour battery pack in certain markets, offers up to 581 kilometers of WLTP range. That sounds great on paper, but as many EV owners know, real driving conditions rarely match lab claims. So let's break down what the EV6 brings, how Kia has engineered the battery, how it performs in genuine tests, and then we'll see whether it's realistic to expect 500 kilometers in everyday driving. Starting with the fundamentals, Kia uses the eGMP platform for the EV6, which supports 400-volt and 800-volt charging architecture, meaning it has potential for faster charging and better efficiency. The facelift introduced the larger battery, 84 kilowatt-hours, replacing the previous 77.4 kilowatt-hour unit, which in markets such as India has been tested to deliver real-world combined range of around 498 kilometers in mixed driving, city plus expressway, when driven in eco mode and with regen braking. On the expressway alone, one test achieved about 560 kilometers at an efficiency of 6.67 kilometers per kilowatt-hour. But as you dig deeper, you uncover the caveats. That 560-kilometer figure was achieved under expressway conditions, likely moderate speeds and favorable temperatures. City driving brought lower efficiency, approximately 5.18 kilometers per kilowatt-hour, with a range of about 435 kilometers in the same test. In other markets, publication testing in the US showed the EV6 fell short of EPA estimates. For example, a Motor Trend test of the 2025 EV6 found a highway range of 266 miles, or 428 kilometers, at 70 miles per hour, or approximately 113 kilometers per hour, on one charge. What this illustrates is that driving style, speed, ambient conditions, wheel size, and trim, RWD versus AWD, all affect how far you can go. So asking whether the EV6 is good for 500 kilometers becomes a nuanced question. Yes, under ideal conditions, it appears possible, but under average real-world conditions for many drivers, it may fall short. The battery chemistry, aerodynamics, and engineering are all impressive. With the 84 kilowatt-hour pack, the WLTP figure of 581 kilometers suggests excellent energy density and efficiency. But WLTP often produces optimistic range estimates. Real-world tests show shortfalls of about 8% in some cases. Furthermore, the test drivers pointed out that external factors, such as temperature rising 12 degrees during the city test, air conditioning use, tire pressure, and driving mode, eco versus sport, all influence the result. What does this mean? If you live in a place where roads are fast, ambient temps high, you often use air conditioning, and maybe you carry passengers or luggage. The EV6 might deliver around 400-450 kilometers on a full charge rather than 500 kilometers. But then again, if you plan your trip well, stay in eco mode, moderate your speed, use strong regen, then 500 kilometers becomes much more feasible. And of course, the charging infrastructure matters. The EV6 supports ultra-fast DC charging, so even if you stop short of 500 kilometers, you can top up quickly and continue your journey, which leads us nicely into part 2, where we'll examine long-distance trips, charging stops, real driving stories, and whether this EV is truly ready for a 500-kilometer road trip without panic. Let's now dive into what it's like to actually take the Kia EV6 out on a long-run road trip and test whether the 500-kilometer on one charge objective is realistic or just marketing. One test carried out by Car and Bike in India covered a loop of 261 kilometers on expressway plus country roads. Starting with nearly full charge, the EV6 reached 48% state of charge after going 261 kilometers at an efficiency of 6.2 kilometers per kilowatt-hour, and later reached 585 kilometers covered with 10% battery remaining. They estimated that the full charge realistic range would be approximately 550 kilometers in those conditions. That is very promising, but it's important to note, conditions included favorable roads, controlled pace, likely moderate load, and strong regen. On the other side, in colder or more aggressive conditions, the range drops. Another real-world data point, Australia's AAA testing program found that the EV6's real-world range was approximately 8% lower than lab figures in their test. Meanwhile, Autoblog and Autocar testing in the UK measured a motorway range of 244 miles or 392 kilometers for one version of the EV6, clearly below the 500-kilometer target. So in the real world, the range varies widely depending on trim, battery size 77.4 kilowatt-hours versus 84 kilowatt-hours, drive configuration RWD versus AWD, driving style eco versus sport, speed, temperature, load, wheel size, and driving environment. But let's assume you drive fairly efficiently, moderate speed, say 90 to 100 kilometers per hour rather than 120 kilometers per hour plus, use eco mode, maintain tire pressure, use strong regen, minimize AC use, and plan your route with some buffer, then yes, achieving or exceeding 500 kilometers is feasible in the EV6. This makes it a strong candidate for road trips compared with many EVs whose real-world 300-400 kilometer range start causing range anxiety. The EV6 adds further advantages. It supports 800-volt architecture, which means in locations with high-power DC fast chargers, 350 kilowatts, you can replenish from about 10% to 80% in about 18 minutes, according to Kia's own claims. For someone taking a 500-kilometer trip, you can start with full, drive 400-450 kilometers, and then do a 15 to 20-minute DC fast charge and comfortably finish the trip. That means you're not constrained by range, but by charging network. On the practical side, however, one must also consider home charging, local infrastructure, availability of high-power chargers en route, and realistic top speed. In high-speed highway conditions, say 120 kilometers per hour plus, or with heavy traffic and full load, efficiency drops significantly and range falls. Many owners report that while highway driving, the range might drop to 300-350 kilometers depending on conditions. There's also the matter of cost per kilometer of range and how that compares with fuel vehicles in your market, as well as the practicality of charging stops versus a fuel stop. In sum, for someone looking for a premium EV with strong range credentials and who plans routes smartly, the EV6 stands out. Yes, it is good for 500 kilometers in some real-world scenarios, but it's not guaranteed in all situations. So your expectations should be calibrated. Don't assume 500 kilometers at top speed with full load in harsh conditions. Expect closer to 400-450 kilometers in many cases, and plan a charging stop to make the 500-kilometer mark confidently. At the end of the day, if the infrastructure is there and you drive carefully, the EV6 gives you road trip capable range, and that's a big plus in the premium EV class. If you're thinking about the Kia EV6 and 500-kilometer one-charge trips, tell us your most important criteria. Is range, luxury, or charging speed your top priority? Drop a comment below, like the video for more EV deep dives, and subscribe so we can help you pick the right electric for your real-world driving.